Welcome to week 4. Yes, we've made it to week 4. So let's take just a second and recap what we went over in week 3. In week 3, we focused on creating a solid foundation for a healthy self-esteem. This is so critical. Before starting the structure, we've got to have a solid foundation. And we identified your worth as the foundation. So hopefully you've written your statement and you're continuing to think it, write it, say it, maybe hear it if you chose to record it for yourself. But the repetition is key in strengthening your connection with your worth. And then we also talked about the second component of a solid foundation, and that is having a progress mindset rather than getting caught up in a perfection mindset. So those are the components that make up our solid foundation for a healthy self-esteem, which means we are ready to start the structure now that we've got the solid foundation. So over the next 6 weeks, we're going to talk about different components, different structural components of a solid self-esteem, of a healthy self-esteem. So the first piece that we're going to talk about, we're going to focus on this week, is that you need to respond to yourself with compassion rather than criticism. All right, I love asking this question. If criticism, if being hard on yourself, judgmental towards yourself, was an effective way to create change, how long ago would you have changed? A long time ago for me, decades and decades ago, right? It's easy to see this when we think about our kids. Do you respond to your kids with criticism when they make a mistake? And if you do, what reaction do you see from them when they are criticized for making a mistake? Criticism is not an effective way to invite learning, to create change. We can see this very easily with others, but we tend to treat ourselves much, much more harshly. So it becomes important to recognize that criticism is not going to be a response that is going to fit in a healthy self-esteem. We've been talking about this, right? You're going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and that's not a process. That's not something that's going to end in this life. So the question becomes, how will you respond to yourself when you make a mistake? All right, so think about a recent experience where you were critical of yourself, judgmental, hard on yourself for a choice you made or how you handled a situation. But recall that experience and how it felt. So typically we feel bad when we make a mistake. And then when we're critical of ourselves, it adds guilt and or shame. So now we feel worse. And our natural reaction to feeling this way is to move away from the experience. We want to avoid, distract, distance ourselves from the experience. When we're feeling this, the last thing we want to do is lean into it. So criticizing ourselves in a strange way can actually be our way of avoiding accountability. Because if I feel bad, I'm critical of myself, I move away from it, I have no opportunity to learn. I have no opportunity to learn. And so I'm more and more likely to just continue to repeat those choices or those patterns. Okay. So criticism is not an effective way. It's important to be aware of, as we're talking about this, of your critical voice. We've all got them. We talked about this a little bit, but as strange as it sounds, your critical voice has an important role. It's there to protect you. What I mean by that is we all have an ego or a self-identity. And our critical voice is trying to make sure we maintain or stay in that comfortable space, even if we're miserable. And so when we're trying to change our behavior, change the way that we think, when we're trying to become healthier, that is still going to be uncomfortable, unfamiliar. And so it's not uncommon. In fact, you should probably expect that as you start to try and make these changes, that critical voice is likely to get louder. Okay? So here's what not to do when that voice gets louder. Don't ignore it. Don't argue with it. Don't try and change its mind. And don't tell it to go away. As strange as it sounds, acknowledge it and even express gratitude. So it could sound something like, I recognize you're trying to protect me, and I'm going to try something different. Or, and I'm safe to try something different. So we're not trying to get rid of it. We're not trying to ignore it, make it go away. We want to acknowledge it and then move on. Do the thing that you wanted to try. Okay, so your exercise for this portion to increase your awareness about your critical voice or about criticizing yourself is to think of 3 recent experiences where you were frustrated with how you handled a situation. You made a mistake. You didn't like how you responded. You were judgmental of yourself. So think of 3 specific situations where your critical voice was really loud or you were critical of yourself in some way. So I want you to write out what you thought, what you said, what you did. I also want you to include what it was that you felt. So yes, I'm intentionally asking you to go back and reconnect with experiences that are likely uncomfortable, but it's important to take a look at this. So identify those 3 experiences, write out in detail what happened, what your thoughts were, what you said, what you did, and how you felt. See if you can identify the emotions that you experienced. Okay. The last piece I just want you to consider as an awareness is think about, now that you've identified what you said, thought, and did, what would it have felt like to say those things to someone that you love and care about? Remember our foundation of worth. You are a divine daughter, a beloved daughter, a sacred daughter. What would it be like if you were saying those kinds of things, doing those kinds of things to a divine daughter? So maybe, hopefully, there's maybe a little bit of a prick there, like, ooh, no, that wouldn't be good. Because that's going to help you make the shift from criticism to compassion, which is what we talk about next.